Continuing our discussion on the late night announcement. Well, we like to keep calling it the late night announcement. I suppose we're on holiday. Anything is late after 4 o'clock in the afternoon, isn't it? But nonetheless, it was an announcement that came in last night where President Jacob Zuma said that the appointment of a commission of inquiry into state capture has now officially been announced, and it is going to be. This is after the Public Protector Thuli Madonsela state of capture report, and Chief Justice Mogoeng Mogoeng was recommended that Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo overlooks this one. We'll be talking to Khaya Sithole, Political Analyst, about all of this. Now, Khaya, before we left, we were talking about the terms of reference for such a commission. Who drafts these?
This is uncharted territory. Every single commission of inquiry that's ever been established, the president had the right to do so. So, of course, he wrote the terms of reference depending on what the issues were. So, in this particular case, you've got this unique state of affairs where at least one part of this process has been outsourced to the Chief Justice, who has then appointed the judge. So, we think that the reality is that the president will still be the one that drafts the terms of reference and say this is what needs to be done. And, of course, he has to do this in consultation with the DCJ, who will now be heading up the commission. So, in as much as one would think that it doesn't make sense for the president to be writing the terms of reference, it appears that the Constitution only ever envisaged that the president would always appoint a commission of inquiry, and of course he'll write the terms of reference himself. Some have been suggesting that perhaps in the state of capture report that Thuli Madonsela wrote, that she actually wrote the terms of reference, but she really didn't. What she really mentioned there is the fact that there ought to be a commission of inquiry using that report as a starting point. So if you use the term starting point, it will simply say, look, this is the reference point, that state of capture report, but then I want you to look at all these other issues. And I suspect that that's what the president is going to go out and do. Yeah,
and this could take us years upon years to get to the bottom of, and that's the fear, because people want an answer now as opposed to 3 years' time.
Yeah, and the danger here, of course, is that as soon as the president essentially expands the scope and says, don't just look at ESCOM and look at entity X and entity Y, the first question that all of us would have to ask is, well, how does the president know that there's something to be looked at in that particular entity? And if I was aware that there's some element of corruption going on in that particular entity, why did not act upon it? So I'd be very curious to find out how he then expands the scopes, because if you really just limit it to what Thuli Madonsela looked at, the centerpiece was ESCOM. So if you said that let us use ESCOM as a reference point and then find out what happened there, then it will be a much shorter process. But if you read what the president's statement was all about yesterday, he seems to be imagining this wonderful utopia where every single aspect of corruption is being looked at. And of course, that is such an abstract concept. He'd really have to codify to say, in this entity, I think this is what's happening, go look at it. In that particular parastatal, I think this is what's happening, go and look at it. So I think that in as much as he wishes to expand the scope, what the commission will end up doing is to say, look, all the things that you mentioned, we're not sure how to implement them. We are sure about ESCOM. Let us focus on that, and then maybe release an interim report, and then we'll take it forward.
Just finally, the Gupta family, we haven't spoken about them, and they've always been alleged to have been at the center of state capture. Yeah. What is their involvement in all of this? I mean, where will they fall into this commission, and what is going to happen to this family?
I think what you'll see is that the commission eventually will obviously then solicit a lot of different views from people that have been involved, implicated, whether by rumor or innuendo or fact. So, of course, the Gupta family would have to be called to account, and they'll really probably for the very first time would then be able to explain their position and explain what their participation was in what we call the state capture project. So I think that in as much as we all really think of them as the guilty parties, they will then be able to perhaps give us an insight into who else was really involved in these particular issues. And of course, their own reputation, it sort of precedes them. So I think that the public, when they come into the commission to participate, will be very skeptical about everything that they say. But I suppose that this is why you have an official judicial process, because people who lie under oath are then subject to prosecution. So we're hoping that for the very first time, we're going to get to the bottom of what really happened.
All right, we'll leave it there for now. Khaya, thank you. Thanks so much for talking to us here on the program. Khaya Sithole is a political analyst and giving us just his views on President Jacob Zuma's announcement of this commission of inquiry into state capture. We'll have more analysis in the next hour here on Morning Live, so do stay tuned, including what can we expect from this commission? What is it going to look like? Is it going to look like the ESCOM inquiry? Will it look like the SABC inquiry? Or is this going to take on a very different view? So we'll have a lot more discussions. Do stay tuned for that. Right now, let's take a break. News at 7 after this.